I invented a whole bunch of general education courses. I was a firm believer in general education. I didn't know it. That's what I wanted to do. Kids who had no interest and who all the prerequisites they could breathe on a mirror and had a pulse, and they could get into my classes. I had no prerequisites. I wanted to teach my parents, and I've invented the course on Yiddish culture. My parents came out of that culture. I also knew that Hitler was something unique in world history, and I got two courses on German culture, both dealing with the rise of Nazism. And I felt every undergraduate should know something about the rise of Nazism, how it happens. And so I invented these courses. I taught it in the Fletcher School. I taught it in the undergraduate college. No prerequisites. You didn't have to know anything. I had engineers, museum school students, dyslexics, everybody under the sun. They could take that course. All you needed to get into it, as I said, was a pulse themselves and could breathe on a mirror, and they were able to get into the course.
Okay, it's a great pleasure for me to tell you that joining us now on Open Book is Professor Saul Gittleman. He's the Professor Emeritus and former Provost of Tufts University. Now, he's written several books, but his most recent book is An Accidental Triumph, The Improbable History of American Higher Education. What a time to be talking to you, sir. And just as a way of background, I met Professor Gittleman. He probably may not remember this as well as I remember it, but I met him in November of 1981. So this is 43 short years ago. I had a lot of pimples on my face. I took the Eastern Shuttle to Boston to spend some time with you. And you told me to get my... Well, you're very polite. You never use any bad words or anything like that, but you told me to get my stuff together,
Yeah,
Professor. And I tried to do that over the...
What was the name of that good friend that you had? Was it close to Trump? Also a Tufts graduate.
Yeah, his name is Billy Tomaso.
Tomaso, the concrete business, right?
Yeah. So Billy was in the
Billy,
concrete.
Bill Tomaso, nice man who really loved you.
Yeah. Well, he loved my dad. So, I lost my dad last year, but my dad, at that time in my dad's life, he had graduated from being a crane operator. He was actually weighing trucks. So this is how the butterfly effect, right? It's all, so my dad's weighing trucks. He strikes up a relationship with Billy Tomaso. Billy Tomaso is a former Tufts graduate. I think there's some study halls and so forth named after Billy.
Yeah.
And he said, okay, well, don't send your son to the local school. I want you to send him to a place called Tufts. My father thought Tufts was spelled Toughs, just to give you a sense for...
Well, there are a lot of colleges in this country. That's one of the things that's remarkable about it. We've got 6,000 institutions that give degrees.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you were very, very dear to me then. You're very, very dear to me now. But my first memory of you was I went up the stairs at Ballou Hall. You were in that beautiful office of the provost.
Yeah.
And you told me my SAT scores were not good. They were okay, but I needed to take them again. And but I got into Tufts, and then we stayed close. And you were instrumental in me getting into Harvard. You probably don't remember that, but you
were instrumental too. You suddenly went from being a Dems D's Does kid from Long Island to Phi Beta Kappa. You got accepted to Harvard Law School.
I took it seriously, so but you helped me.
I did, but you had a lot going on between your ears, and without what you had already, it wouldn't have happened. So we both can complement each other. But I remember you as becoming a remarkable student.
All right. Well, it's very, very sweet of you. Okay. You joined Tufts in 1964, if I remember correctly, because that's the year of my birth. So that's 60 years ago. But you've been in higher education for 7 decades.
Yep.
I have that correct.
Next birthday is number 90.
Yeah. And you look great. God bless. And, so I expect to be at your 110th birthday. Hopefully you'll still like me at that point and you'll invite me. But let's talk about the choice of going into higher education for somebody like you, very, very gifted man, could have done anything. You were also a great athlete and a great baseball player. But let's start with the choices that you made and your origin.
So much in life is serendipitous, Anthony. You've learned that yourself. It's an accident. My parents were East European immigrants who never spent a day in a school anywhere, neither in Europe nor in America. They snuck into this country after World War I. My father came illegally, my mother came legally, and settled down. But they never learned. My mother couldn't read or write. And so when it came time to go to college, they were going to push me onto it, particularly my mother, but they knew nothing about colleges, absolutely nothing. They wouldn't have been able to name one. And prestige meant nothing in those days. This was the 1950s. I had started elementary school in 1930. So I had a long educational experience from the 30s on. And my baseball coach, Mr. Bocari, came home one day and said, Saul will go to Drew. That's where I did my Navy V-12 program during World War II, he told them. And so whatever Mr. Bocari said was fine. And the next thing I know, Sydney is basketball player, Saul, baseball player. We didn't even apply. We just showed up on the campus in Madison, New Jersey as ball players, and we were accepted. The manager of the team asked me, what are you going to major in? I said, what's a major? I thought it was an Army rank. And he said, well, it sounds like you don't know too much about colleges. I'm the German teacher here. You'll major in German. I'll take care of you. So I go home and told my parents, I'm going to major in German. I never studied it before, not in high school. Nobody studied German. And the next thing I know, I'm a German major and on a pathway to a career as a German teacher. So accidents, showing up at Drew, changing my life. They were a little Methodist school, and it changed my life. There are thousands of little colleges in America that give kids like me that kind of opportunity.
So, but Saul, you were arguably one of the most passionate teachers. I took as many of your courses as I could take. So you had a passion for education, and you had a passion for lecturing. And am I wrong? Tell me.
I was a performer. I didn't know it. I didn't know myself. Teaching and what you get a degree in, you get a PhD eventually. It's a research degree. The only thing you're really taught is how to do research. Nobody teaches you how to teach. If you got it, you got it. If you don't have it, you don't have it. And the vast majority of the 1.5 million faculty in this country, none of us was trained to teach. Very few PhD programs spend any time in training people to teach. They train them to do research. The PhD degree is a German invented degree. The Germans invented it. We wanted it. We took it and trained generations of PhDs to be scholars. If you happen to be a performer, and I was a performer, you're a performer. You have a certain gift of being able to present material. And I learned that, and it came intuitively. And I also knew to keep my own opinion out of the lectures. So when kids would ask me, well, how do you feel about this? I'd say, it's none of your damn business. All I'm doing is presenting the information, the facts, and as much as I can, the evidence. And I happen to be a good teacher. It was the luck, just a lot of luck.
Okay, well, we're going to get into the book in a second, but there were a couple seminal courses when you were at Tufts University. The hardest courses to get into were your courses. And so there were 3 courses I took as an undergrad, and one I came back to the school from Harvard and took at Fletcher. I don't know if you remember that, but I took a diplomacy course with you. I actually wrote a paper in that diplomacy course related to FDR and decisions that were made by FDR during the Holocaust. But the 4 courses I took, one was called German Writers.
Yeah.
One was the Introduction to Yiddish Literature.
Yeah.
And then there was
where you learned all your Yiddish.
I learned Yiddish. Yeah, I'm one of the few guys out here on Long Island, Saul, that knows the difference between a Shagus and a Shiksa. See that?
But you also learned Schadenfreude.
I did. I learned Schadenfreude, which is we're going to talk about that as well. But why those courses, Saul? Why teach German writers? Why teach about Yiddish literature? Why teach about diplomacy during the Second World War?
You know, I was a generalist. I was told, teach your courses and teach anything you want. That was the message I got from the dean, who gave me tenure at Tufts. He put his hands on my head and said, Poof, you have tenure. Now don't go. Teach whatever you want, and that's fine. And I invented a whole bunch of general education courses. I was a firm believer in general education. I didn't know it, but I wound up, that's what I wanted to do. Kids who had no interest and who all the prerequisites they could breathe on a mirror and had a pulse, and they could get into my classes. I had no prerequisites. I wanted to teach my parents, and I invented the course on Yiddish culture. My parents came out of that culture. I also knew that Hitler was something unique in world history, and I got 2 courses on German culture, both dealing with the rise of Nazism. And I felt every every undergraduate should know something about the rise of Nazism, how it happens. And so I invented these courses. I taught it in the Fletcher School. I taught it in the undergraduate college. No prerequisites. You didn't have to know anything. I had engineers, museum school students, dyslexics, everybody under the sun. They could take that course. All you needed to get into it, as I said, was a pulse themselves and could breathe on a mirror, and they were able to get into the course.
So it's 40 years for me now, Saul. I'm taking those courses, and so I'm gonna say a couple of things to you, and I want you to react. Okay?
Yep.
I'm gonna say the word Tazio.
You know, Tazio was the character in Thomas Mann's Death in Venice, the young 14-year-old boy that Gustav von Aschenbach fell in love with. So I had kids like you reading stories like Death in Venice. You discovered Thomas Mann. You discovered Sholem Aleichem. You discovered that there was a thing called literature that you could learn about human nature from. And
you didn't have Magic Mountain on your syllabus, but I ended
no,
up
it was too long. It was too long.
I ended up reading Magic Mountain as a result of you.
Yeah.
So when I say Tazio, you know what I'm talking about, right?
Oh, sure. Do you remember the scene in Death in Venice when Gustav von Aschenbach stopped
with the overripe strawberries? You
remember overripe strawberries, and he killed himself.
40 years later, I still remember, right? So you must have impacted me somehow, right?
Yeah.
But the point was the messaging. Tell me if I got this wrong. You were describing the Eastern European Jews and their culture of suppression and oppression. And they were telling very interesting stories at that time. One of the stories was the lottery ticket. It left a very big impression on me. One of the stories was Gimple the Fool.
Yeah.
And, of course, you had the Tevier stories that Shalom Aleichem wrote about.
Mm-hmm.
And these were about family. They were about commitment to culture, commitment to religion. They were about love. What else were they about, Saul?
They were also about not understanding what your children were all about. I mean, don't forget, Tevye, who was an Orthodox, observant, Hasidic Jew, had 2 daughters. One married a Jewish communist. The other married a Gentile communist. The one who married the Gentile communist said to her father, he's another Gorky. He's the second Gorky. And Tevye said, so who was the first Gorky? Tevye knows nothing about what's going on around him in Russia at the end of the 19th or the beginning of the 20th century. And young Jewish kids were dropping Torah, dropping Bible, weren't interested in that. They had discovered a new Bible, Karl Marx.
Yeah.
And Tevye had no idea what was going on. And so that part of it, not understanding children and their parents, that was a big part of that course also. A tragedy for Tevye.
When I was reading that as a young man, I felt the emphasis on culture, the value system. You also put in that course things about reform as the Jews left Europe and came to the United States. Goodbye, Columbus.
Yeah.
The Philip Roth stories.
It becomes relevant for today's trouble that's going on the campuses, because where did those people want to go? They didn't want to go to Palestine. They wanted to come to the United States.
Right.
And millions did. But when you got into your FDR research, you also found out that the United States closed its doors in the 20s and 30s, shut them tight. We didn't want those people coming in.
Especially during the war. I mean,
before the war, in the Reed Johnson
the war, we sent ships back. We were
but the Reed Johnson Restrictive Immigration Act was 1924.
Yeah,
that's why my father had to come in illegally. He came on a boat loaded with Scotch whiskey. He said it was during Prohibition. My mother got in okay through Ellis Island. It was a chain. My father had to come in illegally, which he managed to. But that was America in the 20s and 30s. The doors were shut. We wanted nothing to do with immigrants. Nothing is new. Everything gets repeated. So you have to understand the 20s and 30s to understand where we are now in the 21st century.
Well, I mean, listen, my grandfather talked about how he came through Ellis Island, and because of Teddy Roosevelt's immigration legislation in the early 1900s, Italians were to be designated as non-Caucasian,
Yeah.
and so that was a very
That was eugenics.
yeah,
You know, we were teaching eugenics in the American public school system. When Hitler wrote Mein Kampf, he wrote a letter congratulating America on getting it right, so that Hitler learned everything he knew about eugenics from a few Germans and a lot of Americans.
yeah. No, it's fascinating, but I want to segue because this country, this beautiful country that you and I live in,
And love.
created the two of us because we were both middle class people, and
Yep.
without higher education and the enrichment that you get from higher education, the continuous learning, the curiosity, the fire that gets ignited at an undergraduate university, you don't end up having the lives that we've had, these interesting lives that we've had. So tell us about higher education in America, the Moral Land Grant Acts
Well,
of the 19th century, and this beautiful book that you've written about education.
well, you need about 2 or 3 weeks or a 15-week course for this, Anthony. But the American higher education is unique among anything in the world. There's nothing like it. We have 6,000 degree granting institutions. Some are tiny, some are huge, some are faith-based. We have religious institutions. There's nothing like it in the world. There's no Holy Cross in the Soviet Union. There's no Notre Dame in Iran. There's no Brigham Young anywhere. There's no MIT, no Harvard, or Bryn Mawr. They don't exist in any other country. The rest of the world has civil servants, and we have anarchists like or myself or you. There's a little bit of ungovernability about you, a little bit of ungovernability about me, and we are the products of American higher education. We take adolescent kids, much younger than the Europeans, and say to them, come in. You don't have to pick a major for 2 years. You can start out wanting to be a doctor and end up being an Episcopalian priest. No other country does that. When at the age of 11 in Europe, Germany, Italy, most of the other countries, China, they tell you at the age of 11, you're going to be a doctor, you're going to clean toilets. Well, we don't do that. We waste time, we waste a lot of everything, but we are unique. There's nothing like American higher education. The rest of the world's teachers as faculty are civil servants. They work for the state. The American academic is ungovernable and works for nobody. So, and yet we have never been less popular. The rest of the country right now considers American universities, American higher education, the biggest problem that they've got. It's worse than China. It's worse than Iran, worse than anything. The American colleges and universities. That's the general impression that Americans have of their colleges and universities. At the same time, they don't want to recognize that we are the envy of the world. The rest of the world has already sent 1 million of their children to American colleges. If we would let them in, they'd send 2 million, or they'd come themselves, because what they want is what they don't have and what we have, a kind of unbelievable freedom to learn and to do pretty much whatever you want. American people don't like what they have now. In the 20s and 30s, nobody cared. I learned my Civil War history from Gone with the Wind. I thought that was it. Everything was, and I learned we cared more about Newt Rockne, All-American, and Pat O'Brien playing Newt Rockne and Ronald Reagan playing the Gipper in 1940 than we cared. People knew who they were. They wouldn't have known who the president of the University of Chicago or Harvard was. They didn't care. What was the American image of college student? It was Groucho Marx and horse feathers. They laughed at it. He was president of Huxley College trying to win the big game against Darwin College and hired 2 professionals, his brother Chico and Harpo, to play on the football team. It was anarchy, chaos, and funny. And Americans prefer their colleges and universities that way, right up through John Belushi in Animal House, 1978. We don't want our colleges to be successful or serious. We win the Nobel Prizes. We are the envy of the world, and they don't care.
So I want to test a few things on you because there's a couple of big revelations in your book. I want to talk about the GI Bill in a second, but before that, I want to test something on you. So the freedom of speech that the United States has in its Constitution, and the freedom of the press, it checks people in power. It's the fourth estate. It holds people in power, but it has this ancillary effect, Professor, in the sense that it's a wide berth for creativity. We teach our young people that they can think and speak freely. They go on to create Facebook, eBay. They go on to create things like Tesla. I mean, I could name all these great
Well, we
innovations.
also have people like Edison or Henry Ford or John Rockefeller who never went to college. We love them, though, also.
Yeah, yeah. But my point is that this freedom, this petri dish, it does have some excesses to it or fat tails. One of them is the protest movement. One of them is, the silent majority may not like certain. I've always viewed our universities as the lungs of the First Amendment.
They
Meaning, you know,
they love Division One athletics. They
yeah,
love the transfer portal. They love the billion-dollar industry now, hundreds of billions of
yeah.
dollars of gambling that's going on. There's not much criticism of that, but that is one of the great disgraces of higher education. But it'll never go away because we love it.
When I was an undergrad, there was a protest movement. People went into Blue Hall. They occupied it because they wanted the university to divest from South Africa.
Right?
There was a struggle against the apartheid movement in South Africa,
Yeah,
and you and Jean Mayer, then the president of the university, the protest lasted a little while, but it ended quite peacefully. What do you
yeah.
think's going on today in comparison to protests, say 30 or 40 years ago?
Not that much different, Anthony. They want to politicize. Kids want to politicize the university. They want the university to have a foreign policy and have political opinions. My response to that, Mayer's response was also the same. Our job is to protect your political opinions. Universities don't have a political opinion, so we're going to keep our mouths shut and teach evidence as much as we possibly can. But we also had a cover at that time, the Sullivan principles. So we were able to divest a little bit or do something. It sort of placated the kids. And before long, Mandela got in. De Klerk didn't blow up the world because he had 8 atomic weapons and dismantled them, and it ended. But South Africa was very much a training ground, just as Vietnam had been a training ground for college campus protest before that. Nobody protested in the 20s or 30s. They didn't care about what was going on in the rest of the world. They didn't care about Nazism. They cared mostly about white people not keep staying in power. That character in The Great Gatsby, who you meet on page 2, Tom Buchanan, Yale graduate in 1915, said the white people are losing authority. The blacks and people of color are taking over the world. That's what he learned at Yale.
Yeah,
So
so it's interesting. I mean, there was one great protest in the early 30s that were the World War I veterans. They descended
well,
upon
that
the
was the March on Washington.
the
Yeah.
March on Washington. And remember what MacArthur had to do.
MacArthur put him down.
Yeah, yeah, it
Yeah.
was a
But
very,
that
very
wasn't a college protest.
no,
These
no,
people
it
were
was
basically uneducated.
100%.
The vast majority of American soldiers in World War One
Yeah,
were illiteracy was the major problem, and bad teeth. There were more people who were discharged from the army because of bad oral hygiene. They had no teeth and they had gum infections, and illiteracy. It was the biggest two problems. That's why the GI Bill was such a transformative thing
and
and changed America forever.
this is a real segue. I think the of all of the social programs in America, the thing I got out of your book, and I want you to react to it, is that the GI Bill did more to create the American dream than anything that I could think of, because you took Jews from East New York and Italians from Williamsburg, Brooklyn, who had no shot at getting educated. They came out of the army and they were told by the U.S. government that their tuitions were going to get paid for. So they showed
Yeah.
up at Pace University. or Hofstra or CUNY,
Anywhere they wanted.
and they went from blue collar families to white collar aspirational living. Tell us a little about the GI Bill.
First of all, it was an accident.
Yes, of course.
The
Tell us
American
about the
Legion.
accident of the GI Bill.
The American Legion did not want a repeat of World War One or the end of World War One, when there were 200,000 soldiers coming back whose jobs had been taken by somebody else. So they wanted to create a means by which maybe 250,000 returning soldiers could hold off for a year or two or three or even four and let the economy settle down. Well, 250,000 and go to college. 250,000 didn't go to college. 7 million did. They never expected this tidal wave of soldiers coming back who decided they wanted an education. So it shocked them. The colleges all of a sudden exploded, needed anybody standing in front of a classroom. That's how I got my opportunity to teach anywhere I wanted. It was before World War II, the faculty was 99% male, Protestant, white.
Right.
The student body was 90% white, Protestant, male. And that was it. World War II changed it all, and the GI Bill was basically responsible for that.
But so I want you to react to this, because I think about this often. World War II changed so many different things, but think of the man in the gray flannel suit for a second, and the Sinclair Lewis book. Think of Mad Men, the television series. These men, mostly men, they came back from the war.
1 million more married war brides.
Right. 1 million married war brides. They come back from the war. They have this organizational structure of the military. They apply it to corporations.
They matured. They were much more mature.
They were much more mature, and they applied it to businesses large and small, but they also applied it to American politics. 85% of our members of the Congress, both in the Senate and the House of Representatives, came out of the war.
That's the big change now. Now, when the draft ended in 73, that ended 99% of the country's relationship with the military. Now you've got hardly any. You got this group of people who do all the fighting, and most of the Americans don't know any of them.
But I think it's contributed to the great polarity of our time. Do you know?
Oh, yeah.
George McGovern couldn't really fight with Bob Dole. They both served in World War II.
Yeah.
And even though they were ideologically opposed, they loved the country and the Constitution.
It didn't save John Kerry in Vietnam.
Right.
He lost, they made fun of him or whatever they did. They made it a political thing. It didn't even the senator from Arizona, John McCain, that it didn't help him, even though he was in the Hanoi Hilton. So by that time, Americans were getting sort of already isolated, and it's got the complete separation between military soldiers fighting wherever they are fighting now, and the rest of the population. And the Congress reflects that.
So we still have the largest economy. We still have the largest amount of business startups, the largest amount of venture capital. Most of this flows from this great asset that the United States has, which is its higher education.
It's research.
Research, yes. And yet we have this bad rap about higher education.
And we win all the Nobel Prizes also.
And we win the Nobel Prize. So I want to put you in charge for a few minutes. You're now the Mad Men marketing executive. You're the ad guy for higher education. What is the message that America would need to hear about their higher education?
Just try not to be quite so anti-intellectual. And now American higher education has shot itself in the foot. We make terrible mistakes also. The costs are out of control. It's $1.7 trillion of debt. Biden is trying to deal with it. He can't. And people yell and scream. The big-time athletics is a disaster. We have scandals of people trying to get their kids into prestigious schools. Besides March Madness, the football thing, we have Stanford football players flying now to the East Coast to play games. So we create an insanity, and there are many, many mistakes in higher education. At the same time, just acknowledge that we are the envy of the world. And the rest of the world, even though you don't want to acknowledge it, normal John Q. Public America, just accept the fact that our research, our Nobel Prize winning research, is the greatest in the world. And the University of Shanghai, the Chinese monitor this very closely. They have a list of the 50 best research universities in the world, and you publish that list, and 40 of them are American. And the Chinese themselves acknowledge this. They have spent billions and billions in trying to catch up. They have not yet. And ironically, they haven't yet because we have let our research become what it always should be, free and unfettered research to break through and make great discoveries. That doesn't happen anywhere else in the world. Hitler had an opportunity. The Germans had the greatest educational system in the world up until 1933. Then he politicized it, destroyed it, and within 10 years, we got the bomb. The only reason we got the bomb is we got the Germans and Hungarians who helped us get the bomb.
Well, Saul, you ignited a fire in me of lifetime learning. And so as a result of you, I've read more than my share of Rilke, more than my share of Bertolt Brecht. I've read passages of Goethe. And
That's what it all is about, Anthony. It's lifelong learning. That's why it's called commencement. It's the beginning.
Right. Amen. But I want you to react to this for a second, because you said this to me 40 years ago and I didn't fully understand it. But what you basically said was that Adolf Hitler was a man. And, we have a tendency to demonize him today. Okay. And yes, he could have been perhaps one of the most evil people to live, or at least the most evil that we're able to historically record. But what is it about human nature, Saul, that creates somebody like Adolf Hitler? Because we can demonize him and two-dimensionalize him, but we have to recognize, because you asked me to read a book called Damien by Hermann Hesse. And in that book, we talked about the abraxas, the good and bad in each of us, and that we're blended between good and bad. And some of us have more bad than good and vice versa. So what do we learn about human nature and people like Adolf Hitler?
I think I remember, if I can remember my lectures about that all through that semester, I talked about also the need for a scapegoat. You've got to have somebody you can hate. And we've only got 6,000 years of recorded history. I remember telling you that too. All we got is the evidence of 6,000 years of recorded history. And in those 6,000 years, we have never been able to stop killing in the name of something. And once you find a scapegoat and you've got the technology to be able to kill a lot of people, then you get the mass death that we're getting, that Hitler got to, World War I got to. Since World War I, it's been mass death. We can kill more and more and more people because our technology has gotten better to be able to do this. We're now in the atomic age, and all we can do is hope that we don't blow the world up.
But what is it about evil, Saul? Tell me.
This was the kind of the question that I would leave to you. I'd say you can either describe us as a naked ape, I remember telling you about the book by Konrad Lorenz called On Aggression. Yeah. Is there a kind of aggression in this evolutionary creation that has evolved into what we are, simians? Or do we have a spirit? Do we have a soul? Is there an afterlife? Those are questions that only you can answer. You have to answer them themselves. The evidence that I can show you and that I showed you then was the results of 6,000 years of recorded history. That's all we had to look back on. And that 6,000 years has been nothing but aggression. Hitler found the perfect device. He found the Jew. He was just the right number of Germans. I think I said this to you then, when he started out, I don't think he had the Holocaust in mind. It came to that. Initially, all he wanted to do was get rid of them and send them someplace. America didn't want them. Nobody wanted them. So they had no place to go. And they wound up among the 50 million Europeans who died. 6 million were Jews. 14 million were Russians. God knows how many gypsies. But you had to find people that other people were willing to despise. And that has been the nature, that's the way it's been. We haven't really gotten away from it. We're looking for enemies now to
Okay, so
demonize.
yeah, well, I mean, listen, the Jewish population is now back to where it was prior to
14
World War
million.
II.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so it was obviously absolutely devastated. The tell us a little bit about Theodore Herzl, who he
Well, you know,
was.
Herzl is an interesting example because you don't hear too much about him in this debate.
Right.
Herzl was a Hungarian Jew who was totally secular. Right? He didn't want to get bar mitzvahed. He didn't want to speak any language but German. He wanted nothing to do with anything. And then he almost converted to Catholicism. And then between that and the trials of the French General Staff in 1894, he got the idea of Zionism. What did he have in mind in Zionism? He wanted a German-speaking, secular state, no religious test at all. His first choice might have been Argentina. He started the Zionist movement in 1894. He died 10 years later in 1904 at the age of 44, still trying for Kenya in the last year of his life. But he died, and then Zionism focused more on the Holy Land. The anti-Semitism will never disappear, but how it came to the Holy Land, if those people could have gotten to America, they would have gone to America. That's where they really wanted to go. But when the doors were shut everywhere else, and then at the end of World War II, after the Holocaust, Europe solved its political problem by getting rid of the rest of its Jews, and the 2 million Palestinians who were there already, they had to pay the price. So right, wrong? I don't think you're ever going to get to right or wrong. I don't think there's an answer right or wrong now to Gaza and Israel. You have to make up your own minds about that. And that's where the university comes in. How do you teach these subjects in a way that gives the student an opportunity to come to his own conclusions?
No, listen, I respect that. I guess the thing I would say about all of this is something that you and I both know. We've watched the Northern Irish situation with the UK.
Protestants and Catholics hating each other.
Catholics. We can talk about
The 30 Years' War. Catholics and Protestants butchered each other.
Well, we could talk about centuries in the 6,000 years. We could talk about centuries of hatred. And we could talk about the
millennia, not centuries, right? Millennia of hatred.
Yeah, and obviously, Shakespeare writes about this in Romeo and Juliet, and you have this tribal hatred. And usually, the great irony of this is it's usually people that have a lot in common. Saul.
Well, the Book of Numbers,
family members. They could be family.
Book of Joshua. You read the Book of Joshua, and he says, "Kill every man, woman, and child in Ai." The Canaanites, they were vessels of evil. Who knows how different the Canaanites were from the Hebrews? I don't think anybody's been able to make certain. Archaeologists can't figure it out. But this need for finding someone who you can dehumanize, human nature hasn't been able to deal with that successfully yet.
Before we go, though, I want to switch to something fun. Okay, the baseball field is named after you at Tufts.
Yeah.
Mazel tov on that. Very
Thank
nice.
You.
Okay. The nice mitzvah for you, and you deserve it. But the question
I'm not sure about that, but that's nice of you to say so.
Why do we have such a love affair in America? I mean, the Europeans are looking at us like we're crazy. You and I watch a baseball game. I could watch 200 of them a year. I'm riveted by every pitch. And I see the game as a mental game and a physical game and an individual game and a team. But why do we like baseball as Americans?
One other footnote, though, Anthony, I'll get to that in a second. But remember, baseball also is as American as apple pie. It was a white man's game until Branch Rickey and Jackie Robinson changed that in 1947. Coming back from World War II, it was going to be business as usual. The women were going to go back. Levittown was, you could not sell your property to a Negro. Yeah. That's the way it's in the protocol language. But Robinson and Rickey came along and changed baseball and changed the national pastime. So that even at baseball, which I taught baseball history for 15 years at Tufts, also reflected all the pros and cons of American prejudice. And we are a nation that has always had a prejudice. We create our own narrative and believe we create a narrative, but there are several different truths about American history. Baseball, the big thing about baseball when it was created was to make sure it had no English roots. They used to yell and cheer, no rounders, no cricket. Baseball has nothing to do with cricket. Well, that's not true. Baseball, if you look at the way they turn their hips, baseball is an evolution of cricket or the English game rounders. But Americans fell in love with it because it was fast. It was a fast game. And then Babe Ruth learned to turn his hips. Up until then, it was a game of separate hands. Ruth learned to turn his hips, hit home runs. Americans loved it. And that love affair has only gotten bigger. Now you can gamble on it, just like you can gamble on you can gamble on basketball and football more. I'm not sure if America is baseball is the American pastime any longer, because it's not as easy to gamble as you can on football and basketball, where you can cheat.
Listen, it's still, like you said, it's a part of the Americana.
But it's part of Americana, and it's a myth that we want to maintain, the national pastime. Football is more than national pastime. March Madness is more than national pastime. More money is spent gambling there than spent on gambling on baseball.
Okay, of course, another great book by you, Reynolds, Rashi, and Lopat, New York's Big Three in the Yankee Dynasty, 1949 to 53. And there's an amazing book about those three pitchers.
It really is. It's, I think, the best book I ever wrote, because it was a time DiMaggio was in decline. Mantle was breaking water fountains, was not yet there. And three veteran ethnic pitchers, one a Polish American, one a Italian American, and one an American, Native American, part Creek Indian, Native American. None of them is in the Hall of Fame. They're all forgotten. People don't even know who they are anymore. Created a record that nobody will ever break. 5 consecutive World Series victories, championships, 49 to 53.
And of course, the great Yogi Berra was catching for
Berra was there.
So it's important.
But they taught Berra how to be a catcher. Berra would never even call curveballs because he was afraid to have, with a man on base, he was afraid that to have a curveball come at him if a runner was on first base. He was terrified of Robinson and Reese. And they played the Mayor's Cup game in 46, 7, 8, 9, 3-game series before the season began. And Robinson and Reese used to steal Berra's jock. Yeah. They were despaired that Berra would ever become a catcher.
They argued about that play at home plate, which
he yelled. He argued until his day. But if you take a close play, he made it close. He was behind the plate. Yeah. He had to reach forward. You can look at that video a million times, and Berra will keep arguing, but he will not argue where he was standing. Yeah. He was behind the plate.
Yogi told me in Steinbrenner's box that Robinson was out, but he loved Jackie Robinson.
They got along. They got along. Berra didn't have a bigoted bone in his body.
No. Or Ralph Branca, for that matter.
Branca was another great guy.
They were very proud that
they were two great. And I'll tell you a third one who just passed away is Carl Erskine.
Yep.
A truly great guy. Indiana, where the Ku Klux Klan felt very happy all during the 30s and 40s. This is the best thing that Indiana ever did, was create Carl Erskine.
Yeah, amazing, Sal. So I have 5 famous words at the end of my podcast. I read out the word. I ask my author to react to it. You can give me a word back or a sentence, but something that comes to your mind immediately, okay? I say the word teaching. You think what?
Objectivity, detachment, disinterest, not your opinion. Give the arguments and get out of it.
Okay. I say the word education. You say what?
Education is when the teacher can get the evidence out without getting his own opinion in.
Okay. I say higher education.
That's what the university is all about. Higher education, the little American college that transforms your life. That's a miracle. They don't exist anywhere in the world.
Well, it did it for me. So I was in a family of people that were all blue-collar people. Nobody went to college. And so I was obviously the first person in my family to go to law school after college. And so it was a unique experience for me. I'll always be grateful for that. I say Tufts. You say what?
I say transition from college to university and all the problems associated with that.
Mhm.
Are we we're a teaching university where everybody has to do research. That's tough. Teaching university where everybody has to do research. You have to be a good teacher and you have to be a productive researcher. That's a problem. That's very few schools have that burden. Dartmouth, Georgetown, Tufts, a couple of smaller schools that are neither small nor large. And that's a toughie. I was an okay researcher and a very good teacher.
Okay, my last word. Okay, and I'm going to give you the last word, of course. I said the word America.
America, who owns the narrative? Who gets to tell the story? That's what the fight is all about now. It's who controls the narrative, who gets to describe what America really is all about. And that's what the fight is. They call it the culture wars, but it's who owns the narrative.
Very
And you
good.
tamper with American narratives, you do so at your own risk. We don't want to hear nasty things about Columbus or about Custer
Yep.
or about slavery. We
Yep.
think that there is a nicer story to tell, and that's the one we want to hear.
Yeah, it's very fascinating. So the title of the book is An Accidental Triumph, The Improbable History of American Higher Education. It's written by Professor Saul Gittleman. And Saul, you made a big impact on my life. I hope you know how big of an impact. And so I'm very grateful to you
It's
always.
what we're in
Please
the
say hello.
business to do, Anthony.
And please say
Take
hello to
care.
Robin for me.
What kills people today? It's all these chronic diseases like heart disease, certain cancers, diabetes, metabolic diseases. And the number one thing that you can do to prevent those is exercise, full stop. I mean, if a person exercises, it radically increases the odds that they are going to live not only a longer life, but that every year they have of that long life is better spent. It increases your mobility. It's linked to better mental health. I mean, it literally is the miracle drug. It's about the closest thing we have to that. Now, of course, it's hard in the short term, but like all things, you get that long-term benefit afterwards.
Joining us now on Open Book is Michael Easter. He's a New York Times best-selling author. The title of the book is Scarcity Brain: Fix Your Craving Mindset and Rewire Your Habits to Thrive with Enough. Michael, great to have you here. I'm a fan of both of your books, but you also have a great newsletter. I mean, this book is written for me, Michael. Let me tell you, I'm like a rat. I mean, I'm reincarnated dog where I want to eat to the point of explosion, sleep, and have my back scratched. Or I'm probably like a rat in a maze. All I want to do is eat sugar. And yeah, I mean, it's just terrible.
Just hit-
Pavlov's dog, exactly.
Just hit the
Pavlov's
lever.
rat, exactly. You know, I am the person you're writing about in the book. I bought the book, I read the book, and then I was like, well, I'm going to get the chance to talk to Michael. So, but let's start with the newsletter. Talk a little bit about your background. How the hell did you get into this?
Yeah, great question. Well, one, I'm glad you enjoyed the book. Thanks for having me. And then second of all, my background is that I worked in magazines for most of my career. So I was an editor at Men's Health magazine for a bunch of years. Then I left that role to be a professor and have just continued to write. But I think really my writing has always focused on, I would say, health, wellness, and psychology topics, but really looking at it from a sort of fundamental view of why do we do what we do? Why are we the way we are, and how can the past sort of inform the current behaviors that maybe don't seem to make sense?
Okay, so let's talk about that. So here's my brain. It's sort of like that 1980s commercial. This is your brain, and it's like they crack an egg, and they say, this is your brain on drugs, and then they fry the egg. We're basically, you know, there's a lot going on up here, right? I mean, there's a consciousness, but there's also primordial things that are running the thing, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
All I want to do is eat bad things. Also, Elon Musk might be right. We could be in a simulation because everything that I want to eat is bad for me.
Yes.
And everything that's supposedly good for me tastes like dog shit. So
Well,
tell me what I got wrong, and tell me where we're going.
Well, I don't think you got anything wrong, to be honest. I think you're 100% normal for that reason. So the book, Scarcity Brain, it really looks at, everyone knows that everything is fine in moderation, and yet we all suck at moderation. And so why is that? And it really unpacks sort of the evolutionary roots of the things that we crave, everything from the junk food you spoke about to the fact that we like to accumulate stuff, right? The average person today has more than 10,000 items in their house. Information. We love hoarding information, right? People are on Twitter all day, Elon Musk being a good test case of that. And also things like status, right? People crave status. They want to sort of have eyes on them. And all these things we crave, I argue in the book, it goes back to the fact that in the past, they would have given us a survival advantage and helped us survive, pass on our DNA. So if you were the type of sort of caveman who was like to overdo things, right? Didn't moderate, you would have survived and passed on your DNA. And we now still have that DNA in a world where we have enough of a lot of these things, arguably too much.
Okay, so how do I stop my sugar craving? Go.
How do you stop your sugar craving?
Yeah.
So here's what I will say is a lot of times that people will use sugar as a tool for something other than calories. And I will give myself an example. I found that when I would get stressed out, I would eat M&Ms. I would eat peanut M&Ms.
I love those.
Oh, they're so good. And food is really interesting because, in the past, for pretty much all the time, the job of life was to have some kids, find some food, and not die. Like we are very much wired to just seek food. If you don't eat, you die. But we now have so much of all this hyper processed food that is just really tuned in to make us eat more of it than I think we want, to crave it. And so it can become a sort of tool for something else. So another stat from my other book, The Comfort Crisis, that I love this stat, is that 80% of eating today is driven by reasons other than true physiological hunger.
Totally true.
Yeah.
I'm never, I mean, Michael, I'm just going to let you know what a glutton I am. I'm never hungry. I'm eating and rummaging and stuff is going in like I'm Jabba the Hutt. I have,
You got to. We
I
all
mean,
have those days.
Yeah. 100%. All right. So let me ask you this, because I've been dying to ask you this. How did you're a great writer, by the way, and you've captured that men's health, like journalistic succinctness, like you're giving really good actionable things to do in the book. But how did you get into this? Like, what was when you were growing up, you said, I always want to be a writer. And then how did you go from being a writer into health? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I grew up single mom, raised me. She was a voracious reader. We always had books around the house. And one day I picked up this book that she was reading called Into Thin Air by Jon Krakauer. And that book just grabbed me. And that was it. That was what I wanted to do with my life. So in that book, he chronicles this Everest expedition that he was on that went totally wrong. Handful of people died on the mountain, but just the way he wrote that story, the crispness of the writing, but also the fact that he could weave in these really informative pieces of information in a way that was not at all like what I was forced to read in my science classes, was just like, I was hooked and sort of became a magazine junkie, started reading a ton, and just decided to try and pursue it as a career, despite all the statistics telling me that was a terrible idea.
No, but you're good at it. And let me tell you, there's money to be made everywhere. One of the things about you is you have your own brand and you have your own equity. So you don't, you'll be just fine. I'm sure your newsletter is kicking ass. You have traveled the world. You've talked to innovators, scientists. Tell us about some of the people that you've met.
Yeah, I have the good fortune of definitely being able to talk to some brilliant people. And, my rule is just that the person has to be interesting and they have to have something that, some piece of information that I think could enhance the reader's lives. And so whether it's from my books or my newsletter, which is called 2%, I'm always talking to interesting sources. So I've talked to Nobel Prize winners, I've talked to Super Bowl MVP winners, but some of the most fascinating conversations I have happen on a lot of my travels. So for example, in The Comfort Crisis, I spoke to this Buddhist Khenpo, which is kind of like a cardinal in the Buddhist faith, about that rank. And I've found really interesting people, like another character in my books and in my newsletters, a guy whose name is Trevor Kashey. And he looks like a Hell's Angel. He's about 29 years old, but he has this IQ that is, it's well over 160. And he's the most brilliant, succinct thinker I've ever met. And he runs a nutrition consulting business, and the amount of people that he's helped by just cutting through so much nonsense and just the clarity in his thinking, it's just amazing. And it's really given me this saying that I think everyone has an interesting story, has interesting stuff to share. You just have to ask enough questions and be willing to go there and meet them face to face.
Okay, so I'm reading a note from my producer about the comfort crisis, and you've got a tie-in between the scarcity brain and the comfort crisis. And so, if you had to summarize those two books for us, what would you say?
Well, I would say when I started writing Scarcity Brain after Comfort Crisis, I didn't think they were related. But I since quickly found out that they are. And the Comfort Crisis is basically looks at what happened to us when our environment changed to one that is very comfortable, where we have easy, effortless access to food, stuff, everything we want, right? We live at 72 degrees. All these things, these advances, they're good in the grand scheme of time and space. But we also know that the things that most improve humans, they often take going through short-term discomfort, whether that's exercise, whether that's sitting with boredom rather than immediately reaching for the slot machine in your pocket, whether that's sitting with a little bit of hunger. And with Scarcity Brain, it really looks at, whereas Comfort Crisis looked at what if we removed, which is discomfort and the benefits of it. Scarcity Brain really looks at all this stuff that we've added in. Screen time. The average person spends 12 hours or more a day on digital media, food, possessions, and those systems that we have that used to help us survive really get co-opted in this wonderful new world we have.
Yeah. I mean, so there was a great book that Jeff Hawkins wrote. This has got to be 10 years ago. Maybe you heard of the book. He's the inventor of Palm Pilot. He's a contemporary of mine. Grew up out here on Long Island with me. We didn't know each other, but I mean, he was out in Huntington. I was in Port Washington. But he said that the brain, the way it evolved, you have the front part, the neocortex is the new cortex, and then you have the subcortexes, which are more primordial. And so you've got a lot going on in your brain, a lot of animalistic, atavistic impulses, and then you have your self-awareness and your ability to look at yourself and observe the universe and obviously adapt and learn from the universe. Why is it so hard for the part of our brain that I would call the 160 IQ part of the brain? At least I don't have one, but your friend did. Why can't the really smart part of the brain have better control of the primordial part of the brain? Like right now, you've totally screwed me. I'm going to just tell you why, Michael. I want to run upstairs and I want to eat peanut butter M&Ms, and they are in my house. That's probably the biggest problem. I probably shouldn't have them there. Just letting you know, you put it in my brain. I think my IQ's okay, pretty good, and I don't know if I'm not going to have them or not. I'm probably going to have them as soon as I get off this show with you. But go ahead. So what's wrong with me and what's wrong with us that we can't fight the primordial instincts inside us?
Yeah, well, yeah, I've cued myself to go eat peanut M&Ms after this as well. So the short answer is that doing the thing that was rewarding in the short term, the eating immediately, the grabbing the new item, the whatever it might be, that always made sense in the grand scheme of time and space, right? Because you didn't know if you were going to survive. You didn't know if you were going to have food tomorrow. That piece of information, clamoring over the next piece of information about someone, that could have saved your life, right? Because you don't know the intention of another person. So having sort of short-term impulsive thinking and actions made sense for all the time. And then now we find ourselves in a world where it doesn't quite make as much sense. We're still kind of driven to make that for evolutionary reasons. And it is a fight to kind of go, okay, well, I want to go eat, 10 servings of peanut M&Ms after this. And man, that would be fantastic. So I'm going to have to be willing to sit with this discomfort. Hopefully I can do it, of saying no to that and realizing that now today, in order to live well, you have to make decisions that help you in the long term. So I'll give you a study that I love, that I think it sort of wraps this up. It found that 2% of people take the stairs when there is also an escalator available. 2%. So what does this tell us? It tells us that humans are wired to do the next easiest, most comfortable thing, even when it doesn't serve us in the long run.
Right.
Because 100% of those people knew that taking the stairs would give them a better long-term return on their health, maybe even their mental health. But 98% of people choose the short-term comfort and ease. And that is simply passed down to us from evolution, even though it doesn't make sense today to do the easy thing in every scenario. So my newsletter is called the 2% newsletter because it really takes that idea of the fact that humans are wired to choose short-term comfort, even when it hurts us in the long run. And that choosing to embrace discomfort in the short term can give you a long-term benefit.
Okay, it's very, very well said. And of course, Andrew Huberman, I believe, single-handedly has stopped a large swath of a younger generation than me from drinking. There's a lot of teetotaling going on, and I'm a Wall Streeter. I'm watching the earnings of some very big liquor companies go down, where they were rising, and there was tons of people drinking tequila and all this great stuff. And all of a sudden now they're doing this. Mm-hmm. And Huberman has explained to people what happens to your body under alcohol. And people are like, wait a minute, I don't know if I want that to happen. I can tell you this. I have this ring. It's an Aura ring. Mm-hmm. If I drink, this ring is like a nanny. This is like owning a nanny state on your finger. The nanny state alerts me that I'm a moron, and it says this is bad and this didn't go well. My sleep was screwed up, and so stop drinking. I basically said, I'm not going to drink anymore. Why am I do that? Why am I doing this to my body?
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on drinking, and where do you think drinking's going?
My thoughts on drinking are that if a person, so this one gets really complicated because when you look at big studies of population, drinking is often associated with health benefits so long as it's in moderation. And so then you go, okay, well, why is that? And the answer is that it's not the alcohol. It's what people do when they drink in moderation, which is that they socialize. So being social is very good. So I think personally that if a person is having, say, 1 or 2 drinks a couple nights a week, very importantly, in the context of being social, they're going to a bar, they're hanging out with
you're
people.
You're not sitting at your home bar.
Yes.
You come home, you're Don Draper, and you're popping like 4 martinis for dinner.
Exactly. So
no bueno, right?
Exactly. So if you're drinking in a way that's social, I think it's probably, I think it could potentially be a positive. At the same time, alcohol is a toxin. We don't need it. So I think really it just comes down to personal choice. But if a person does find themselves doing the Don Draper thing, that's probably worth having a hard conversation with yourself with.
All right. So drinking is not so bad, but you prefer to be social because you like when people are social, but obviously don't drink and drive. Okay. So you spent your entire career and you built all of this great research, all this learning into these books. What's one habit or lifestyle change that you believe you get the greatest return on investment?
Me personally or the general population?
Both.
I don't know why I just asked you that because I think my answer would be the same for both. It would be exercise.
Exercise. Okay.
I think for me personally, it's the thing that keeps me sane. I'm a high wired person. As a kid, I was always running around. If I don't burn off steam, I just go a little wacko. And then when you look at, for the general population, when you look at what kills people today, it's all these chronic diseases like heart disease, certain cancers, diabetes, metabolic diseases. And the number one thing that you can do to prevent those is exercise, full stop. I mean, if a person exercises, it radically increases the odds that they are going to live not only a longer life, but that every year they have of that long life is better spent. It increases your mobility. It's linked to better mental health. I mean, it literally is one study that I love called exercise, the miracle drug. It's about the closest thing we have to that. Now, of course, it's hard in the short term, but like all things, you get that long-term benefit afterwards.
Okay, so I'm going to add something. I'm not great at it, by the way. So I'm a better exerciser than I am a sleeper. I have a hard time actually in bed because I'm always moving, ready to go. What do you think about sleep?
Very important. I also think that there's a lot of information out about sleep that can make it very confusing. I actually wrote a whole newsletter about this. it's on the website. I think it's called 8 Sleep Tricks That Actually Work or something like that. But I think the long story short of that piece is that a person has to find what works for them with sleep. So we hear a lot of rules like you must sleep in a blacked out room. You must absolutely sleep 8 hours a night. You must absolutely have silence. And it turns out when they do larger studies, sleep is very individual. Some people are great with 6 hours. Some people need 8.5. Some people actually do better with the TV on. Some people do better with a little bit of light, a little bit of sound. And so I do think that it's one of those things where people often can become anxious that they're not getting 8 hours when you might be actually best on 7. So kind of learning your own habits, a little bit of introspection, I think can be really useful for people around sleep.
Yeah, I think it's been a big thing for me personally. I can say that when I'm sleeping better, I'm thinking better. I'm also, my metabolism is better. And so people got to try to get into that habit. Okay. So what's the easiest change? Let's say that I am the laziest rat in the rat cage, in the rat maze, and all I think about are M&Ms, peanut M&Ms. What's the easiest change I can make?
I mean, I go back to that 2% stat, to be honest, and trying to figure out how can you translate that idea of doing what you're already going to do, but making it slightly harder and applying that across the board. So if you take the stairs and the escalator idea, it's like you have to get up to the second floor. Mm-hmm. You can either take the stairs or the escalator. One's going to give you a long-term return on your health and improve your life across the board. And another is just going to be nice in the short term, but could actually add to chronic disease.
So interesting because I have a boss. He's my old boss, who still thinks he is my boss. By the way, I'll point that out. But my old boss, Michael, is in good shape. He's 72. He's got me by 12 years, in very good shape. And I said, I am impressed. You're in very good shape. And he said to me something that I'll share with you. I want you to react to it. He said, you know what? I'm doing 100 push-ups and 100 sit-ups a day. I don't care what day it is. I don't care what and if I can't do 100 in a row, I'm going to do 10 and then 10 and then 10 until I get to 100. And I do it every single day. What is your thoughts on that? Just the incremental few things to do if you can't do everything.
I love that because it tells us two things. One, his main thing is that he's consistent, right? He's doing it every single day. So a lot of people will go, oh, I'm going to exercise, and they'll do it for a week. They'll pick some big crazy plan. And then after a week, they're like, I can't really sustain this. So he's able to do it consistently. And then two is that he has found something that works for him, right? And I think that's a big key, is finding a type of exercise that you actually enjoy, because the best exercise, in my opinion, is the one that you will do consistently. And that often comes down to enjoyment. I like this guy.
Yeah. I mean, he's in good shape. He's in better shape than me. I've been doing 5 push-ups a day. I'm going to try to get it up there. Okay. I'm now at the point in my podcast. We pull out 5 ideas from your book. Call it our 5 famous words. I'm going to say the word. You're going to respond to me with comes to your head, the first thought that comes to your head. I'm going to say the word cravings. You say what? I'm
going to say ultra processed / junk food. So right. One part of the book, I went into the Bolivian Amazon because there's a tribe there that doesn't get heart disease. And heart disease is what kills Americans, by and large. And the reason these people don't get heart disease is because they don't eat all the super processed food we do, which is engineered to be craved and packed with calories. It all comes down to what they eat.
Okay. I'm going to say mindset.
My reaction to that is your mindset changes based on the conditions you put yourself in. In the Comfort Crisis, I talk about this idea that you can basically think of as problem creep. And this research found that as people experience fewer and fewer problems, we don't actually become more satisfied. We simply lower our threshold of what we consider a problem. And so as the world has gotten better, we have ended up with first world problems. And the answer to that, to build a mindset that can accomplish things, that can get through things, that doesn't complain and find problems, is to do things that challenge you, because that really resets the sort of goalpost.
Okay, I say fitness.
Simple definition of fitness is move your body and objects.
Okay, I say comfort.
My response is that comfort is good, but too much comfort is linked to all the things that make us sick, all the things that make us crazy, all the things that are associated with poor outcomes. So you got to balance comfort and discomfort.
So be comfortable with being less comfortable.
Yes.
Ultimately, right?
Mm-hmm.
You got to get comfortable with being in a little bit of discomfort if you want to stay healthy.
Yeah, it's a necessary buy-in.
All right. I say scarcity, Michael. You say what?
We used to live in worlds of scarcity, and now our worlds have shifted to abundance. So the ancient problem was scarcity, and the modern one is abundance.
And is that good or bad? Or a little bit of both, maybe. A little bit of both, right?
Little bit of both, right? I like the fact that after this podcast, you and I are gonna, go to the pantry and smash M&Ms.
Definitely having them, because I have a prehistoric brain, and I'm just slightly better at craving control than I guess a rat in a maze. I'm definitely going to have some, but I mean, the truth of the matter is, I've got to make sure I don't have too many.
Exactly.
Because then I'll be sluggish and I'll feel terrible and blah blah blah. But the points of your books are: get in the gym. Everything that you're feeling and you're fighting is part of your evolution. It's part of your survival. But think about it. Switch your mindset about it. And get into some good habits incrementally, and you'll change your health. Is that the resonating messages?
Yeah. Do the great thing about living today is we have so much opportunities, and we don't have to worry about running around in the landscape outside in the weather, hunting our food. But because we don't do that, that also has downsides. And so if you can figure out ways to sort of do things that humans have been doing for all of time, that is to say, get outside, move your body, do challenging things, I think that you find that people are better off.
All right. Well, the title of the book is Scarcity Brain: Fix Your Craving Mindset and Rewire Your Habits to Thrive with Enough. It's by Michael Easter, New York Times bestselling author. I greatly appreciate you being on. My next guest, Mom, I had a guest on named Michael Easter that's very focused on health and mindset. Okay. But we know that you're a garbage eater, right? We know that, right? You're a health nut, right. Ma? Are you a health nut, Ma?
No, I'm not a health nut. Right. But I've lived to 87, so, it's right. Not bad.
I mean, but how did you do that, Ma? You like hot dogs. You like Oreo cookies. And,
yes,
you like liverwurst, right? We know this about you, right? You're a junk food eater. You always got candy in the house, right?
Yes.
All right. So how did you make it, Ma? What are the Marie Scaramucci health and beauty secrets? 87 sharp as a tack, putting sugar in the tea. Go ahead. Tell me how you did it.
Tell you, there is a reason for that, because I do like my vegetables. And in my house growing up, we had broccoli rabe and spinach almost every day, one or the other.
Garlic.
I had a lot of it, and my mother would put poached eggs on the spinach because I never really liked meat. The only kind of meat I like is meatballs and sausage. Otherwise, if I look at a steak, I almost get sick thinking about the animal.
Okay. All right. But I guess if it's ground up a little more, you don't think about it? I mean, what is that all about?
I don't think about it as much.
Okay. So it's... Okay. So you think it's the broccoli rabe, and you think it's the spinach that helped you get there. You don't think it was the Oreo cookies? No, right? Probably not.
I had Oreo cookies every day. If you ask my nieces, they remembered me eating a whole half a gallon of milk with Oreo cookies. I've always had that.
Yeah, no, I know. I know they're in the house. My kids know where to go to get the Oreo cookies. They know.
Right, and my little James and Nikki love them, and when they come here, they separate them exactly like I used to, so that they would have.
Yeah, it's the only place
and then they eat the plain one.
It's the only place on planet Earth that Deirdre would let them eat that stuff. All right, what are before we go on to the next topic? What are some of your other health and beauty secrets, Ma? Your podcast fans are dying to know.
I don't like the sun, so. For my age, I did work with skin for 12 years. And
right. You were a makeup artist.
Models. clear role models makeup in my day. And I think cream is very important, and I don't think you should lay in the sun. And some of it's inherited. I had a father who didn't have a line on his face. My mother died fairly young, so I don't know how she would have aged. But I have a turkey neck, and there's nothing I could do about it. But my face is not lined. I don't have a line on my forehead.
Are you dying for the plastic surgery to take out the turkey neck, Ma? You could tell me.
I'm afraid of the way they got to do it because I know enough about how they have to do it.
So you wear turtlenecks then, right? You wear turtlenecks to hide the turkey neck or no?
Yeah, I try to. In the winter, it's a perfect time because I always have either a scarf or something around my neck so you can't see it. And my mother died young, but she always wore pearls around her neck. And I think she must have been aware that my mother was vain. I think that I got it from my parents, and you have it, and so does David. Susan might be getting it, but not yet. But you and David are vain.
Okay, Ma. Well, that's a mouthful for this week's podcast.